I didn't turn lights up because it's just.
Destroy the classroom process. That's what we do.
Okay. Go ahead.
Alright. Hello, my name is Turnbull.
I'm Abdulla Inkis.
And today we'll be talking about the book White Privilege, Part 2 and 4. So I went over Part 2, and one of the first things they talk about is this idea of white privilege. And this idea, are white people limited by their race? I think the obvious answer is no. One of the first quotes they use is, someone was asked, is there a Negro problem in the United States? And he responded, there isn't a Negro problem, there's a white problem. So it wasn't just that that there's this Negro problem, it's the fact that every question you hear about this is phrased in a way in which black people are the issue. White people do not need to think about their race, they do not need to prove that they should be able to talk about things other than their race. And they can just live in a world in which their race is just normal. A very good example of this is very recently, Senator Cory Booker announced his candidacy for the presidency. A New York Times article covered it the next day, and the quote they used was, Cory Booker is embarking on a campaign to become the nation's second black president. In every candidacy that we've been seeing in the Democratic Party, you get talking of diversity, women are running, blacks are running, gay people are running, but that's what they're called. They use these social markers to limit them. With Hillary Clinton, she was constantly berated for just simply being a woman. And people like Donald Trump, yes, he had many things that were used against him, but the fact that he was not white was never questioned. It was never questioned that he should be able to talk on black issues or LGBTQ issues or anything like that because he's white. He is the dominant force in this world. The next point they use is history. This idea of possessive investment in whiteness is a historical thing. In virtually every aspect of our lives, legal, social, economics, it has been historically accurate that it helps white people. The New Deal program was heralded as a thing to fix the entire nation. It would bring us out of the Great Depression and bring us into prosperity. However, every aspect of that disproportionately helped whites. The Wagner Act and Social Security originally excluded farm workers and domestics, which the author then argues disproportionately helped whites because black people were mostly farmers. And then we learned before the Federal Housing Act, it essentially made it almost impossible for blacks to get a house in a time when it was incredibly easy to do so. Unions would exclude black workers in favor of helping middle-class whites. And a more recent example would be police have been found to go to rougher neighborhoods in which you would think more violence and more crime would happen, and which we know is disproportionately black due to the Federal Housing Act. They would go into these neighborhoods and would arrest more people to reach the quotas that they wanted. History has always helped whites invest in their future instead of helping blacks. And even after the Civil Rights Act of 1965, people believed that this was over. They just thought that racism essentially was over. However, that's just not true. That the Civil Rights Act bred this argument. Not every person did blank, so you can't blame me for it. Not every white person owned slaves, so you can't blame me for it. Not every white person is racist, so you can't blame me. The problem with this argument is that it's logically flawed. You can't say that you aren't part of the issue because you have accepted the fact that slavery and all of this has helped you in the future. This idea of white privilege is compounded and inherently found in throughout every part of our lives. So by arguing, saying that, oh, I didn't do this specific thing, or oh, it's history, that's just false. And she argues that you can't, this is just, it's a very bad argument, to be frank. The next point she makes is this idea of global white supremacy. How is it possible that a world that has so many different countries, so many different ideals and all of this, how can it adhere to the same inherent policy? This is a map of the world, and it shows every country that has ever been formally colonized or somehow controlled by a European country. Countries in purple are Europe and Russia, predominantly white, and all the green and yellow are some form of control. 5 countries so far have never been controlled by a European country, including Japan, North Korea, South Korea, Liberia, and arguably Ethiopia. But people don't believe that. Every single one of these has been controlled. They have had policies in which either blatantly made them seem like third world countries or just aimed to get rid of black people in general or Asians or any of that. And you can see the fact that this is still affecting them today. All of the countries we deem third world countries, fourth world countries, some of the poorest countries in the world are the ones that have been affected by colonization. Africa is one of the poorest continents in the world, as is Latin America. And part of that is because the people that control the vast majority of wealth, the people that control the banks, loans, and all of that are America and Europe. So this idea of global white supremacy is ancient, and it's because we have deemed that we, white people, are the superior race and that they can control whatever they want to control. The final point she wants to make is Asia's role in a black-white world. Most legislation, most social influences deal with a black-white basis. You kind of forget about that there are different races. In a Supreme Court case in which Asians were deemed able to be segregated, one of the lines in the court document was, "In the eyes of the Supreme Court, yellow equaled black and neither equaled white." So, Asians have always straddled this line between, are they black, are they white, do they get the same rights as a white person, do they get the same rights as a black person, and this is for many things. One of which is this idea of the model minority. The model minority was created on a basis of Asian Americans attempting to appear more white in both legislation and in the world, and they were deemed kind of the model minority. They did better than blacks. They were essentially a step above them. And this was challenged by a campaign done by the University of Pennsylvania, which you can see these pictures, in which they argue that I'm not a model minority, I'm not better than any other person, I'm just me. And so the argument being made is that Asia, it's its own breed, it's its own culture, it's its own minority in itself. And to include and say that oh, they're just part of African Americans or they're part of the white population is just wrong. All of these things look towards just a history of racism and how it impacts not only today, but in the future. And now I believe it's time for part 4.
Okay, so now let's talk about breaking the silence. Some people in the United States say that we talk too much about race and racism, but even though that's not enough, because we still see racism out there. According to the book, there was a story about a black boy who was 13 years old. He was beaten into a coma because he was riding his bicycle in a white neighborhood in Chicago. So how can we stop such stupid racism acts? We need to continually break the silence about racism. We need, whenever we can, we need to talk about it more at our schools, in our homes, in our workplace, and our community groups. And the reason why I picked those 2 pictures, first picture says white silence means violence, because we all believe if you are being silent while you see people doing bad things, that means you agree, but you cannot even say anything about it. So that's violence. And the reason why I picked Martin Luther King says, because he was saying, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. We have to all fight for our humanity. We have to all fight to stop racism. And he also said, another says about silence. He said, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So now let's talk about fear. I would like you guys to answer the first question, which is, why do people of color fear? Based on your guys' experiences, knowledge, or stories you have heard. So why do they fear of the community, or why do they fear of not doing things that they want to do?
I'd say they're afraid because people, like, they're more likely to be thought of as criminals. They're afraid of police because police are more likely to arrest them even if they're not doing anything wrong. They're afraid because they're more likely to end up as a victim of somebody, whether it be conscious or unconscious racism. They're likely to get the brunt end of it and they will suffer.
You don't want to add it anymore?
I was just trying to go off that. They're afraid, like they fear because of past events. Like they have the reason. Like we've made the reason for them to fear.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that because of the history or the past experiences. They fear, and also white people fear, because some white people or some other people who does not know or who's not well educated about the race and racism, they get afraid or they get scared because they don't have enough knowledge. They do not have enough experiences with black people. And there is a quote from the book that I like. It says, in order for there to be meaningful dialogue, fear, whether of anger or isolation, must eventually give way to risk and trust. A leap of faith must be made. It's not easy, and it requires being willing to push past one's fear. It was written by one student. So now let's talk about confronting one's own racism and talking about anti-racism action. I would like first to play a video.